Itamum, Story 1. The Loop on Highway 79. Robert Hayes had been driving big rigs for 27 years, hauling everything from frozen foods to industrial equipment across the western United States. He prided himself on never missing a delivery deadline, never getting lost, and never letting the loneliness of the road get to him. But what happened on the night of September 14th, 2023 on a remote stretch of Highway 79 in Nevada would shatter every belief he held about the nature of reality itself. The evening started unremarkably. Robert had picked up a load of agricultural machinery parts from a warehouse outside of Reno and was headed southeast toward a distribution center in rural Arizona. The route would take him through some of the most desolate terrain in the country. Long stretches of empty desert, where civilization seemed like a distant memory. He had driven this route dozens of times before and knew every truck stop, every turnoff, every landmark along the way. Around 11:30 that night, Robert was making good time, cruising at a steady 65 miles per hour through the darkness. The moon was full, casting an eerie silver glow across the barren landscape. His GPS showed he was approximately 40 miles from the next town, a small place called Junction Springs where he planned to fuel up and grab coffee. The CB radio crackled occasionally with distant chatter from other truckers, but mostly it was silent. He had his favorite classic rock station playing softly through the speakers, keeping him company in the vast emptiness. That's when he noticed the mile marker 312. It was distinctive because someone had spray-painted a crude smiley face on it years ago, and Robert had always used it as a mental checkpoint, knowing he was about 30 minutes from Junction Springs. He glanced at his dashboard clock, which read 11:43, and made a mental note. Everything seemed normal. 10 minutes later, he saw the mile marker again. The same mile marker 312 with the same spray-painted smiley face. Robert frowned, thinking his eyes must be playing tricks on him. Maybe it was a different marker, and his tired mind was confusing them. But deep down, he knew better. He had been awake for 14 hours, but he wasn't that tired. Something was wrong. He checked his odometer. It had advanced exactly 10.3 miles since he first passed the marker. He checked his GPS. It showed him moving steadily forward along Highway 79. But there was the marker again, impossible as it seemed. Robert felt a cold, prickling sensation crawl up his spine. He grabbed his CB radio handset and clicked it on. "Breaker 19, this is Big Blue hauling southeast on 79. Anyone out there copy?" His voice echoed strangely in the cab, as if the air itself had changed density. Static answered him. Pure, uninterrupted static, which was odd because there had been scattered chatter just minutes before. He tried again, adjusting the squelch. Nothing but white noise. Robert pressed harder on the accelerator, pushing the truck up to 70 miles per hour. The engine roared in response, and he watched the speedometer needle hold steady. The landscape rushed past his windows, sagebrush and rock formations creating shifting shadows in the moonlight. His headlights cut twin beams through the darkness, illuminating the white and yellow lines of the highway stretching endlessly ahead. 11:58. That's what his clock read when he passed mile marker 312 for the third time. 15 minutes had elapsed. He had covered approximately 17 miles according to his odometer. And yet here was that damned marker with its mocking, smiley face. Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. His heart hammered against his ribs and his mouth went dry. He pulled out his cell phone. No signal. That wasn't unusual out here in the deep desert, but combined with everything else, it felt ominous. He tried calling dispatch anyway. The phone displayed the connection attempt for a few seconds before showing the inevitable failure message. Robert stared at the device, watching his own reflection in its dark screen, a middle-aged man with gray stubble and wide, frightened eyes. The logical part of his brain tried to rationalize what was happening. Maybe he had somehow gotten turned around, doubled back without realizing it. But that was impossible. Highway 79 was a straight shot through this section of Nevada. No major turnoffs, no places where confusion could occur. He would have noticed a U-turn. The GPS would have alerted him. Something else was happening, something that defied logical explanation. Robert passed the marker again at 12:13, then at 12:29. Each time his odometer continued to climb. His GPS showed forward progress, but reality kept resetting to that same point. The classic rock station continued playing, but Robert started noticing something disturbing. The songs were repeating in the exact same order. He heard the opening guitar riff of the same Leonard Skinner track 3 times in succession, at the exact same moment each time he passed the marker. By the 6th loop, Robert was fighting panic. His breathing had become shallow and rapid. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning running at full blast. He tried varying his approach. On the 7th loop, he slowed to 45 miles per hour. Made no difference. On the 8th, he pulled over completely, sitting on the shoulder with his hazard lights blinking for a full 5 minutes before continuing. The mile marker appeared right on schedule. The desert around him looked increasingly strange. The rock formation seemed to shift positions between loops. A dead tree that had been on his left appeared on his right. The moon, which should have been moving across the sky, remained fixed in the exact same position hour after hour. Robert realized with growing horror that he wasn't just repeating the same stretch of road. He was trapped in some kind of temporal bubble, a loop that had captured him and wouldn't let go. At one point, around what should have been 2 in the morning, Robert saw another vehicle. Headlights appeared in his rearview mirror, closing the distance rapidly. Hope surged through him. Another truck, another driver, proof that he wasn't alone in this nightmare. He slowed down, wanting the vehicle to catch up, wanting to see another human being to confirm that reality still existed. But as the headlights grew closer, Robert noticed something wrong. They weren't moving right. The beams wobbled and weaved, not like a vehicle driving erratically, but like they were phasing in and out of existence. When they finally pulled alongside him, Robert looked over and saw nothing. No truck, no car, just those headlights floating in empty space, keeping pace with him for nearly a minute before suddenly vanishing like they had never been there. That's when Robert started screaming. Not words, just a primal sound of fear and confusion. He laid on his horn, the blast echoing across the empty desert. He flashed his high beams. He did everything he could think of to break whatever spell had been cast on this cursed stretch of highway. Nothing worked. Mile marker 312 appeared again, its spray-painted face seeming to grow more sinister with each encounter. The loops continued. Robert lost count after 20. His clock became meaningless. The timestamp would jump forward, then reset, then jump again in patterns that made no sense. 3:17 became 2:49, became 4:33. Linear time had ceased to exist. His fuel gauge, which should have been dropping steadily, remained stuck at 3/4 full no matter how long he drove. Exhaustion began to set in, not physical tiredness, but a deep mental fatigue from the sheer impossibility of his situation. Robert found himself talking to the empty cab, narrating his experience as if recording it for posterity. This is loop number, I don't know, maybe 30. I've been trapped here for what feels like 5 or 6 hours, but my truck computer says it's only been 90 minutes since I first passed the marker. The odometer reads that I've traveled 368 miles, but I haven't moved at all. I haven't seen another vehicle except for those phantom headlights. The CB is still dead. My phone is still showing no signal. He tried different tactics. He attempted to stop exactly at the mile marker, getting out of the cab to examine it closely. The metal sign felt real enough, cold to the touch, slightly rusted at the edges. The spray paint was faded, probably years old. But when Robert got back in his truck and started driving, he passed it again within minutes. He tried closing his eyes for long stretches, navigating by feel. Didn't matter. The marker appeared right on schedule when he opened them. During one loop, Robert made a decision. If he was going to be trapped here forever, he wanted to leave some evidence, some proof of what happened. He grabbed the logbook he was required to keep and began writing everything down in meticulous detail. The date he entered the loop, his location, the cargo he was carrying, the exact circumstances of his entrapment. He described the repeating mile marker, the static on the CB, the frozen fuel gauge, the phantom lights. He filled page after page, his handwriting growing more frantic as he documented his nightmare. Then something changed. It was subtle at first. On what Robert estimated was his 43rd or 44th loop, he noticed the spray-painted smiley face on the mile marker looked slightly different. One of the eyes seemed smaller. Or had it always been that way? He couldn't remember anymore. His grip on concrete details was starting to slip, reality becoming fluid and uncertain. The next loop, there was a new marker. Mile marker 313. Robert's heart leaped with desperate hope. Was he finally breaking free? He pressed the accelerator harder, watching the speedometer climb to 75 miles per hour. The desert rushed past faster now, and for several glorious minutes he convinced himself the nightmare was ending. Then he saw mile marker 312 again. Not behind him, where it should have been if he was moving forward, but ahead of him. Impossible. He had just passed 313, but there was no denying what his eyes saw. The numbers had reversed. He was going backwards now. Or the markers were, or space itself was folding in ways that violated every law of physics. Robert stopped trying to understand. His mind, pushed beyond its limits, began to accept the impossible. He was trapped in a place where normal rules didn't apply, where cause and effect had broken down, where the road itself had become a prison. The 27 years of driving experience meant nothing here. All his knowledge of routes and highways and navigation was useless against whatever force had captured him. Hours blended together, or maybe it was minutes, or maybe time had stopped having meaning altogether. Robert existed in a perpetual present, an eternal now where the same stretch of highway repeated endlessly. He passed the marker so many times it became meaningless. His initial terror gave way to a kind of numb acceptance, then to something darker, a creeping despair that threatened to swallow him whole. He began to hallucinate, or at least he thought they were hallucinations. Figures appeared on the side of the road, people who weren't quite right, their proportions slightly off, their movements too smooth or too jerky. They would wave at him or just stand there watching as he drove past. One looked like his ex-wife. Another resembled his father, who had died 8 years earlier. Robert stopped looking at them, keeping his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The radio started playing music that didn't exist. Songs with familiar melodies but wrong lyrics, or lyrics in languages he didn't recognize. Sometimes it wasn't music at all, just a low humming that seemed to resonate in his bones, making his teeth ache and his vision blur. He turned it off, but could still hear it faintly, as if it was coming from inside his own head. Just when Robert had resigned himself to spending eternity on this cursed loop, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic. There was no flash of light or sudden jolt. He simply noticed, during what might have been the 100th loop, that mile marker 312 looked farther away than it should. And when he reached it, he kept going. Mile marker 313 appeared, then 314. His odometer started matching his GPS again. The fuel gauge began to drop normally. Robert didn't celebrate. He was too drained, too damaged by the experience. He just kept driving, afraid that if he stopped or slowed down or did anything to acknowledge what had happened, the loop would capture him again. He drove through Junction Springs without stopping, despite his fuel running low and his bladder screaming for relief. He drove until dawn broke over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that looked almost painful after so many hours of darkness. When he finally pulled into the distribution center in Arizona, nearly 18 hours behind schedule, the loading dock supervisor took one look at Robert's haggard face and asked if he was okay. Robert opened his mouth to explain, to tell the story of the impossible loop on Highway 79, but no words came out. How could he explain something that defied explanation? How could he describe the horror of being trapped in a moment that repeated endlessly, of watching reality break down around him? Instead, Robert just shook his head and said he'd had some truck trouble, got delayed. The supervisor accepted this without question, and the unloading proceeded normally. But Robert knew he would never be the same. The loop had changed something fundamental in him, had shown him that the world was far stranger and more terrifying than he had ever imagined. He still drives trucks today, but never again on Highway 79. The company tried to assign him that route once, 3 months after the incident. Robert refused, didn't even try to explain why. He threatened to quit on the spot, and they backed down, sensing something in his voice that warned them not to push. Late at night, when he's driving through empty stretches of desert or prairie, Robert sometimes thinks he sees mile marker 312 appearing in his headlights. But it always turns out to be something else, his traumatized mind playing tricks. At least that's what he tells himself. Because the alternative, that the loop is waiting for him, patient and hungry, ready to trap him again, is too terrible to consider. Story 2. The facility off exit 92. Patricia Sullivan had hauled pharmaceuticals for 12 years, specializing in temperature-sensitive medications that required precision and care. She took pride in her impeccable safety record and her reputation for reliable deliveries. On the night of March 8, 2024, she received what seemed like a routine assignment that would become the most harrowing experience of her career. The job came through her dispatcher around 8 in the evening. A rush delivery of insulin shipments needed to reach a medical facility in rural Montana by morning. Patricia was in Idaho at the time, finishing up another run, and the timing worked perfectly. She could grab a quick meal, fuel up, and make the drive overnight. The pay was excellent, time and a half for the emergency delivery, and she needed the money. Her daughter was starting college in the fall. Patricia hit the road around 9:30, her refrigerated trailer humming steadily at precisely 38 degrees Fahrenheit, exactly what the insulin required. The route took her north on Interstate 15 through increasingly remote terrain. She had driven this way before, though not frequently, and remembered it as an uneventful stretch of highway that cut through mountainous wilderness. Light snow had started falling, nothing serious, just enough to require headlights and steady attention. Around 1 in the morning, approximately 3 hours into her drive, Patricia's truck computer displayed a warning. The refrigeration unit was experiencing a temperature fluctuation, nothing critical yet, but enough to warrant attention. If she couldn't stabilize it within the next hour, she'd have to find a place to stop and troubleshoot. Losing the entire load to temperature damage was unacceptable, both professionally and financially. She grabbed her paperwork, looking for the emergency contact number for the medical facility, thinking they might have technical support or alternative instructions. That's when she noticed something odd about the delivery address. It wasn't a complete street address, just directions. Exit 92. West 4.6 miles, look for the white building with red trim. No facility name, no phone number, just those cryptic instructions. Patricia frowned. In 12 years of hauling pharmaceuticals, she had never received such vague delivery information. Medical facilities were usually scrupulously detailed about addresses and contact information, especially for controlled substances like insulin. She reached for her CB radio to call her dispatcher, but before she could, another temperature warning flashed on her dashboard. The refrigeration unit was dropping to 32 degrees. Any lower, and the insulin would freeze, rendering it useless. She made a decision. Exit 92 was only about 15 miles ahead according to her GPS. If this facility was her delivery destination, they would have the equipment and expertise to help stabilize her refrigeration unit. If they didn't, at least she'd be close to her endpoint when she called for technical support. Patricia pressed harder on the accelerator, pushing her speed up to 70, trying to reach the exit before the situation became critical. The snow was falling heavier now, big wet flakes that splattered against her windshield faster than her wipers could clear them. Visibility dropped to maybe 100 feet. The highway was empty, no other vehicles in sight, which wasn't unusual for this time of night in such a remote area. Patricia's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her eyes scanning constantly between the road and her temperature gauge. Exit 92 appeared suddenly, almost too suddenly, the sign materializing out of the snow like it had been hiding. Patricia hit her turn signal and guided her truck down the ramp, following it as it curved away from the interstate. At the bottom, she found herself on a 2-lane road that looked recently paved but had no markings, no center line, no edge stripes. Just smooth black asphalt disappearing into the swirling white snow. She checked her trip odometer and headed west, watching the numbers tick up. 4.6 miles, that's what her paperwork said. The road wound through dense forest, tall pines pressing in from both sides, their branches heavy with snow. Patricia's headlights seemed dimmer here, as if the darkness was thicker, more resistant to light. Her CB radio crackled with static, but when she tried to call dispatch, only silence answered her. At exactly 4.6 miles, she saw the building. It emerged from the forest like something from a dream, or maybe a nightmare. A large rectangular structure, 3 stories tall, painted stark white with bright red trim around the windows and doors. Floodlights illuminated its exterior, creating an island of harsh brightness in the surrounding darkness. But something about the lighting was wrong. It was too white, too bright, almost painful to look at directly. Patricia slowed her truck, studying the building as she approached. There were no signs identifying it as a medical facility, no parking lot markings, no ambulances or other vehicles, just an empty expanse of pavement leading up to a loading dock. The windows were covered with some kind of reflective material that turned them into dark mirrors, making it impossible to see inside. She checked her temperature gauge, 29 degrees and still dropping. She didn't have time for hesitation. Patricia maneuvered her truck toward the loading dock and brought it to a stop. She set the parking brake, grabbed her paperwork and flashlight, and climbed down from the cab. The cold hit her immediately, far more intense than it should have been. This wasn't just winter cold. This was something deeper, something that seemed to penetrate through her heavy jacket and thermal layers to wrap icy fingers around her bones. Her breath came out in huge white clouds that hung in the air longer than they should, as if the atmosphere itself was different here. Patricia walked toward the building, her boots crunching on snow that seemed too crystalline, too perfect in its formation. As she got closer, she noticed other details that deepened her unease. The red trim around the windows and doors wasn't painted. It looked organic somehow, like it was part of the building's structure, pulsing very faintly with a rhythm that reminded her of a heartbeat. The loading dock had a door, commercial-grade steel with a numeric keypad beside it. Patricia reached out to knock, and before her knuckles made contact, the door clicked and swung open. No one was visible on the other side. Just a corridor lit by the same two bright white lights, stretching deeper into the building. "Hello?" Patricia called out, her voice sounding muffled and strange. "I have a delivery, insulin shipment for this facility. My refrigeration unit is malfunctioning and I need assistance." No answer. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and a low vibration she could feel through the floor. Patricia stood in the doorway, every instinct screaming at her to get back in her truck and drive away. But her training and professionalism pushed her forward. She had a job to complete, a valuable cargo to protect. She stepped inside. The corridor was longer than it should have been, extending at least 100 feet into the building. The walls were that same stark white, unmarked by any signs or decorations. The floor was polished concrete that reflected the lights above, creating a disorienting mirror effect. Patricia's footsteps echoed weirdly, not quite matching her pace, as if someone was following her a half-second behind. She passed several doors, all identical, all closed. Each one had a small window at eye level, but they were covered with the same reflective material as the exterior windows. Patricia paused at one, trying to peer through, but saw only her own face staring back, pale and frightened looking in the harsh light. At the end of the corridor, she found another door, this one slightly ajar. Light spilled from the gap, warmer and more natural looking than the fluorescence in the hallway. Patricia pushed it open and found herself in what looked like a reception area. A desk, some chairs, a water cooler in the corner. But everything was slightly wrong. The desk was too tall. The chairs were positioned at odd angles that hurt to look at. The water in the cooler was moving, swirling slowly despite the container being still. "Hello? Is anyone here? I need to speak with someone about my delivery." Patricia's voice was stronger now, irritation mixing with her fear. She had driven all night, was dealing with a potentially catastrophic equipment failure, and this facility seemed to be completely unmanned. A sound came from deeper in the building, footsteps but not quite right. They had a sliding, shuffling quality that made Patricia think of someone dragging something heavy. She turned toward the noise and saw a figure appear in a doorway across the reception area. It was wearing what looked like medical scrubs, pale blue, but Patricia couldn't make out any details of the person themselves. The figure was too tall, maybe 7 feet, and its proportions seemed elongated in a way that made her eyes hurt. "You brought the delivery?" The voice was wrong. It came from the figure but didn't match any lip movements Patricia could see. It sounded like multiple voices speaking in perfect unison, creating an eerie, harmonious effect that raised goosebumps along her arms. "Yes, insulin shipment, but I need help with my refrigeration unit. It's experiencing temperature fluctuations and I can't stabilize it. Do you have technical support or equipment I can use?" The figure tilted its head at an angle that would have broken a normal person's neck. "Temperature is irrelevant. Bring the delivery inside. We will accept it." Something in those words made Patricia's blood run cold. The phrasing was off, mechanical, like someone reciting lines they didn't understand. She took a step backward toward the door she'd entered through. "I need to see proper identification and authorization before I release a controlled substance shipment. Company policy." The figure moved closer, and Patricia got her first good look at it. What she saw made her stomach twist with revulsion and terror. It wasn't human, not quite. The face was too smooth, the features too symmetrical. The eyes were the wrong color, a pale yellow that seemed to glow faintly. And when it smiled, revealing teeth that were slightly too pointed, too numerous, Patricia knew with absolute certainty that she needed to leave immediately. She turned and ran. Behind her, that sliding, shuffling sound multiplied, as if the building had suddenly become full of similar figures, all converging on her position. Patricia sprinted down the corridor, her boots slipping on the too smooth floor. The doors she passed began to open, figures emerging from each one, reaching toward her with hands that had too many fingers. Patricia hit the exterior door at full speed, slamming it open and bursting out onto the loading dock. The cold air hit her like a physical blow, but she didn't stop. She jumped down from the dock, landed hard, nearly fell, caught herself, and kept running toward her truck. Behind her, she heard the door bang open and multiple sets of those horrible sliding footsteps following her. She reached the cab, yanked herself up, slammed the door, and hit the lock button. Through the windshield, she could see them emerging from the building, 5 of them, 7, 10. More appearing every second, all wearing those pale blue scrubs, all moving with that same wrong gait. They surrounded the truck, pressing against it, their yellow eyes staring up at her with an intensity that felt like physical pressure. Patricia fumbled with the ignition, her hands shaking so badly she could barely get the key in. The engine turned over once, twice, died. She tried again, pumping the gas pedal, cursing. The figures were trying the door handles, pulling at them rhythmically. The truck rocked slightly from their efforts. The engine caught. Patricia threw it into gear and stomped on the accelerator. The truck lurched forward and she felt the sickening thump of bodies going under the wheels. But when she checked her mirrors, the figures were standing up again, unhurt, watching her drive away. Their faces all held the same disturbing smile. Patricia didn't slow down until she was back on the interstate, heading north at 80 miles per hour. Her temperature gauge showed the refrigeration unit had somehow stabilized at 37 degrees, exactly where it needed to be. Her hands were still shaking. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. When she finally reached her actual delivery destination the next morning, a legitimate hospital in Billings, she discovered something that made the whole nightmare even worse. According to the facility's receiving department, they had never requested an emergency insulin delivery. They had no record of the shipment in their system. The paperwork Patricia had been given listed a purchase order number that didn't exist. She tried calling her dispatcher, desperate for answers, but got a recording saying the number was no longer in service. When she returned to her company's headquarters 3 days later, she learned that her dispatcher had quit suddenly 2 weeks before Patricia's delivery run. The person who had given her the assignment wasn't anyone who worked for the company. The voice on the phone, the one Patricia had trusted implicitly, had been an imposter. To this day, Patricia doesn't know what that facility was or what those things wearing human shapes wanted with a truckload of insulin. She reported the entire incident to her company and to local authorities, but when investigators went to check, they found no exit 92 on Interstate 15 in that area. According to highway records, that exit had never existed. Patricia still drives trucks, but she refuses any assignments that involve Montana or Idaho. She checks and double-checks every delivery assignment, verifying information with multiple sources before accepting. And late at night, when she's driving through remote areas, she sometimes sees buildings that don't quite look right, structures with too bright lights and red trim that seems to pulse with its own heartbeat. She never stops. She never investigates. She just drives past as fast as her truck will carry her, knowing that some deliveries aren't meant for human hands, and some facilities exist in places where reality itself has gone terribly, horribly wrong. Story 3. The Passenger in the Sleeper Cab. Marcus Holloway had been on the road for 16 years, running cross-country hauls that took him from coast to coast. He preferred the solitude of long-distance driving, the endless ribbon of highway, the constantly changing landscape. His wife had left him 8 years back, tired of his absences, and his kids were grown and distant. The truck was his home now, a mobile sanctuary where he controlled every variable, where nothing unexpected ever happened. That security was shattered on the night of July 23, 2023, somewhere in the vast emptiness of Kansas. The run had started normally enough. Marcus picked up a load of electronics in California, bound for a distribution center outside Philadelphia. 2,600 miles figure 3 days with stops for fuel, food, and legally required rest breaks. He made good time through Nevada and Utah, pushing through Colorado in a single long stint. By the time he crossed into Kansas, exhaustion was setting in. His eyes burned, his back ached, and his brain had entered that fuzzy state where concentration became a physical effort. Around 1:30 in the morning, Marcus decided to call it. He had been driving for 11 hours, which was pushing his legal limit, and the highway ahead looked empty and dark. He found a rest area near a town called Russell, pulled into one of the truck parking spaces, and killed the engine. The sudden silence was profound, just the tick of cooling metal and the whisper of wind across the prairie. Marcus went through his usual routine. Logged his hours, checked his cargo straps through the camera system, set his alarm for 6 hours. His truck had a decent sleeper cab with a full-size bed, small refrigerator, and storage compartments. It wasn't luxurious, but after 16 years he had made it comfortable. He changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, and stretched out on the bed. Sleep came quickly, that deep, heavy sleep of the truly exhausted. Marcus dreamed about nothing, just that welcome darkness of pure rest. Then something woke him. Not a sound exactly, more like a sensation of wrongness, like the air pressure in the cab had changed. He opened his eyes, disoriented, trying to figure out what had disturbed him. His alarm wasn't going off, which meant he hadn't slept his full 6 hours yet. Marcus fumbled for his phone to check the time. 3:47. He had been asleep for maybe 2 hours. Not nearly enough, but something had definitely woken him. He lay still, listening, trying to identify what felt wrong. That's when he heard it. Breathing. Slow and steady, coming from the darkness near the front of the cab. Not his own breathing, someone else's. Marcus's blood turned to ice. He was locked in his truck, windows up, doors secured. There was no way anyone could have gotten inside without him hearing. But there was no denying what his ears told him. Someone was in the cab with him, breathing quietly in the darkness just a few feet away. He reached slowly for the control panel, fingers finding the switch for the interior lights. His heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. Part of him didn't want to turn on the lights, didn't want to see what was sharing his space, but the not knowing was worse. Marcus flipped the switch. The cab flooded with harsh LED light, and Marcus saw him. A man was sitting in the driver's seat, facing forward, completely still. He was wearing dirty jeans and a flannel shirt that looked old and worn. Dark hair hung past his collar, greasy and unkempt. From where Marcus lay, he couldn't see the man's face, just his back and the side of his head. "Who the hell are you? How did you get in here?" Marcus's voice came out higher than he intended, fear making it crack. He sat up, grabbing for the tire iron he kept beside the bed, a weapon and a tool. The man didn't respond, didn't turn around. Just sat there, breathing in that steady rhythm. Now that the lights were on, Marcus could see the man's chest rising and falling, could see his hands resting on his thighs. Real hands, solid and physical. This wasn't a hallucination or a dream. Someone had somehow gotten into his locked truck while he slept. Marcus climbed out of the sleeper, tire iron gripped in both hands, moving carefully. "I'm calling the cops. You need to get out of my truck right now." He reached for his phone with one hand while keeping the iron pointed at the intruder. His fingers found the screen, but when he looked down to dial, the phone was dead. Completely dark, no display, no response to his pressing the power button. He had charged it before going to sleep. It should have been at full battery. The man in the driver's seat finally moved. His head turned slowly, far too slowly, like the motion was happening underwater. Marcus saw his profile, then his face, and felt his sanity crack a little. The man had no eyes. Where his eyes should have been were just smooth expanses of skin, as if he had never had eyes at all. But despite this, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that the man was looking at him, perceiving him in some way that didn't require sight. "You're not supposed to be awake," the eyeless man said. His voice was wrong, too deep, resonating in frequencies that made Marcus's teeth ache. "This would be easier if you were asleep." Marcus backed up until he hit the rear wall of the cab, the tire iron trembling in his hands. "What do you want? What are you?" The eyeless man stood up, unfolding from the driver's seat with movements that were too smooth, too fluid. He was tall, maybe 6.5 feet, and thin in a way that looked unnatural, like his bones were longer than they should be. "I ride with you now. We have far to go together. Miles and miles and miles." He took a step toward the sleeper cab, toward Marcus. "Stay back. I'll hit you, I swear to God." Marcus raised the tire iron, trying to look threatening despite his terror. The eyeless man paused, tilting his head. "You could try, but I don't think you want to. Because if you hit me, you'll find out what I really am. And that knowledge will break something in you that can never be fixed." They stood frozen for a long moment, predator and prey, the air thick with tension. Marcus's mind raced, trying to understand what was happening, trying to find some rational explanation. Carbon monoxide poisoning, a psychotic break. Too many hours on the road finally catching up to him. Any of those made more sense than what his eyes were showing him. Then the eyeless man did something that pushed Marcus's terror into a whole new territory. He smiled, his mouth stretched wider than any human mouth should be able to, revealing teeth that went all the way back, row after row of them, like a shark. "I can taste your fear. It's delicious, but I'm not here to hurt you, Marcus. I'm here to ride with you. I'm here to get where I need to go, and you're going to take me there." "How do you know my name?" "I know everything about you. Marcus Holloway, 47 years old, divorced, 2 kids you barely talk to anymore. Been driving for 16 years, no close friends, no real connections to anyone or anything except this truck. You're perfect. Isolated, alone. No one will miss you if things go wrong. No one will even notice for days." Marcus's grip on the tire iron was so tight his hands were going numb. "I'm not taking you anywhere. I'm getting out of this truck and I'm getting help." "No, you're not." The eyeless man gestured toward the door. "Try it. Go ahead. Try to leave." Marcus lunged for the door handle, yanking on it. The door didn't budge. He flipped the lock, tried again. Nothing. He moved to the passenger side door. Same result. The doors were sealed shut, as if they had been welded closed. He was trapped in his own truck with this thing. The eyeless man laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Now you understand. You're mine until I'm done with you, so here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back in the driver's seat. You're going to start the engine, and you're going to drive where I tell you to drive. Simple. And if I refuse, then I'll make you. And trust me, Marcus, you don't want that. I can crawl inside your head, pull all your strings like you're a puppet. I can make you drive while you scream and can't make your body stop. Or you can cooperate, and this will be much more pleasant for both of us." Marcus believed him. Every instinct he had was screaming that this creature could do exactly what it promised. He was dealing with something beyond his understanding, something that operated by rules that had nothing to do with the normal world. Slowly, carefully, Marcus moved to the driver's seat, never taking his eyes off the eyeless man. He started the engine. The dashboard came to life, all the gauges showing normal readings. His GPS booted up, displaying his current location at the rest area in Russell, Kansas. "Where am I going?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The eyeless man settled into the passenger seat, long limbs folding at odd angles. East. Just keep going east. I'll tell you when to turn. Marcus pulled out of the rest area, his movements mechanical. The highway was empty, not another vehicle in sight. He glanced at his CB radio, thinking maybe he could call for help without the eyeless man noticing. But the radio's display was dead, just like his phone. All his communication devices had been disabled somehow. They drove in silence for an hour. Marcus kept both hands on the wheel, his eyes flicking between the road and his passenger. The eyeless man sat motionless, that smooth expanse of skin where his eyes should be aimed forward. Occasionally his mouth would move, seeming to count or whisper something Marcus couldn't hear. "What are you?" Marcus finally asked, unable to stand the silence any longer. "I'm what comes for people like you. Isolated, disconnected. The ones who slip through the cracks of society. I'm the thing that rides the highways, looking for carriers." "Carriers? You carry me. From place to place, that's all you need to know." The eyeless man turned his head toward Marcus. "Don't try to understand more than that. Humans who try to comprehend what I really am tend to go insane. Their brains just can't process it. Better to stay ignorant. Better to just drive." Marcus drove, through the remainder of Kansas into Missouri as dawn broke. The eyeless man occasionally gave directions, simple instructions to take certain exits or follow specific routes. They weren't heading toward Philadelphia anymore. They were going somewhere else, somewhere the eyeless man needed to be. Around noon, Marcus was approaching complete exhaustion. He had been driving for over 8 hours with no break, no food, no rest. His eyes were playing tricks on him, seeing things in the peripheral vision that disappeared when he looked directly at them. "I need to stop. I need fuel and food." "No stops. You'll drive until I say otherwise. I'll pass out. We'll crash." The eyeless man considered this. "Fine. But I'll be with you every second. If you try to signal anyone, if you try to get help, I'll kill them and make you watch. Understand?" Marcus nodded, afraid to speak. He pulled into a truck stop, fueling up quickly while the eyeless man stood beside him, close enough that anyone watching would have thought they were traveling together. But the other truckers and customers moved past without seeming to notice anything wrong, without reacting to the creature with no eyes. Marcus tried to make eye contact with someone, anyone, desperate for help. But it was like no one could see him. He had become invisible, isolated in a bubble of horror. Inside the truck stop, Marcus grabbed food and drinks, moving as fast as he could. The eyeless man followed, still visible to Marcus, but seemingly not to anyone else. When Marcus went to the bathroom, the creature waited outside the door. When he bought a coffee at the register, standing right behind the cashier was the eyeless man, grinning his horrible shark-toothed grin. Back on the road, Marcus choked down the food without tasting it. His cargo of electronics was due in Philadelphia in less than 48 hours. He was going to miss the delivery, was going to lose his contract, maybe his job. But those concerns seemed trivial compared to his current nightmare. The hours blended together. Missouri became Illinois, became Indiana. The eyeless man occasionally spoke but never said anything meaningful. Just random observations about the passing landscape, comments about other vehicles they passed, cryptic references to places Marcus had never heard of. Night fell again, and Marcus realized with despair that he had been driving for over 24 hours. His body was shutting down, running on pure adrenaline and terror. "How much farther?" Marcus croaked, his throat dry despite the bottles of water he had consumed. "Not far now. Just a few more miles." They were on a rural highway in eastern Ohio, surrounded by farmland and forest. The eyeless man directed Marcus to take a small side road, barely more than a dirt track. The truck bounced and jostled, not designed for such rough terrain. Trees pressed in from both sides, their branches scraping against the trailer. After about 2 miles, they reached a clearing. In the center was an old barn, weathered and sagging, looking like it might collapse at any moment. "Here. Stop here." Marcus pulled the truck to a stop, killing the engine. The silence rushed in, broken only by the ping of cooling metal and the sound of wind through the trees. "What is this place?" "My destination." The eyeless man opened the passenger door, the lock suddenly releasing after being sealed for so long. He climbed down, then turned back to look at Marcus. "Thank you for the ride. You're free now." "That's it? You're just leaving?" "Yes. You'll find your doors work now. Your phone and radio will function. You can go back to your normal life." "But Marcus, let me give you some advice. Don't try to tell anyone about this. They won't believe you. And more importantly, if you talk about me, if you try to explain what happened, I'll hear about it. And I'll come back. Next time, I won't be so polite." The eyeless man walked toward the barn, his form seeming to flicker and fade in the darkness. Marcus watched him disappear inside, and then the building collapsed. Just fell apart, wood and metal crashing down in a cloud of dust. When the dust cleared, there was nothing there. No barn, no debris. Just an empty clearing surrounded by trees. Marcus sat in his truck for a long time, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Eventually, he checked his phone. It powered on, normally showing dozens of missed calls and messages from his company, from dispatch, from clients wondering where he was. His radio crackled to life when he turned it on, normal chatter from other truckers filling the cab. He drove back to the highway, back toward civilization. He made it to Philadelphia 3 days late, having to pay heavy penalties for the missed delivery. His company put him on probation. He lost several contracts, but Marcus barely cared. He was alive. He was free. The eyeless man was gone. But sometimes late at night when he's driving through empty stretches of highway, Marcus catches a glimpse of something in his rearview mirror. A figure sitting in the sleeper cab, just barely visible in the darkness. And he knows with terrible certainty that the eyeless man might be gone, but he's not finished. He's out there somewhere, looking for his next ride, his next carrier. And if Marcus ever talks about what happened, ever breaks his silence, the creature will come back. The passenger will return. And this time there might not be any release at the end of the ride. Story 4. The Voice on Channel 19. Thomas Brennan was a third-generation trucker, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather before him. He had spent 19 years on the road, hauling everything from furniture to livestock across the American heartland. The CB radio was his constant companion, Channel 19 always alive with the chatter of fellow drivers sharing information about traffic, weather, and good places to stop. But what started coming through his speakers on the night of November 11th, 2022 during a run through the Midwest was unlike anything Thomas or any other trucker had ever experienced. The evening began normally. Thomas was hauling a load of auto parts from Detroit to Kansas City, a route he had driven dozens of times. Light traffic, clear weather, good road conditions. Around 9 at night somewhere in Iowa, he was cruising along Interstate 80 at a comfortable 65 miles per hour, his CB radio providing its usual background soundtrack of trucker conversation. "Anyone got eyes on that smoky around mile marker 214? A voice asked, using the common slang for highway patrol. "That's a negative, driver. Road looks clear from here," another voice responded. "Standard stuff." Thomas listened with half an ear while focusing on the highway ahead. Then around 9:45, the chatter suddenly stopped. Just cut off mid-sentence, replaced by pure static. Thomas adjusted the squelch, checked his connections, but the static continued. Not unusual, dead zones happened, interference from power lines or terrain. He figured it would clear up in a few minutes. It didn't. The static continued for nearly 20 minutes, uninterrupted white noise that started to grate on Thomas's nerves. He was reaching to turn the radio off when a voice came through. But it wasn't like the normal CB chatter. This voice was different. Wrong. Attention all drivers currently listening to Channel 19. We interrupt your regular communication for a special broadcast. The voice was perfectly modulated, professional sounding like a radio announcer. But there was something underneath it, some quality that made the hair on the back of Thomas's neck stand up. "This ain't a broadcast channel," Thomas muttered to himself. CB radio was for peer-to-peer communication, not broadcasts. Someone was violating protocol, using too much power, probably some amateur with illegal equipment. Tonight we bring you stories from the highway. True stories, real experiences shared by drivers just like you. Our first story comes from a trucker named Thomas Brennan, currently driving eastbound on Interstate 80 in Iowa. Thomas's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That was his name, his exact location. How could someone on the CB know that? He grabbed the handset, clicked it on. "This is Thomas Brennan. I don't know who you are, but you need to identify yourself and explain how you know my information." The voice continued as if he hadn't spoken, completely overriding his transmission. That shouldn't have been possible. CB radios didn't work that way. You couldn't talk over someone else's transmission like that. Thomas Brennan has been a trucker for 19 years. He drives a Peterbilt 379 painted blue and white. His cargo tonight is auto parts, 16,000 pounds worth. His wife's name is Jennifer. His daughter's name is Amy. She's 14 years old, plays soccer, gets good grades. Thomas worries about her constantly when he's on the road, worries that he's missing too much of her life. Thomas felt ice forming in his stomach. Those details were right. All of them. Not just public information, but private details about his family. He grabbed his cell phone, trying to call Jennifer to warn her that someone knew too much about them. But his phone showed no signal despite him being on a major interstate where coverage should be solid. "Don't bother trying to call, Thomas. Your phone won't work while we're talking. This conversation is between you and me and all the other drivers listening right now." Thomas looked around frantically. There were other trucks on the road, a few ahead of him, one in his mirror behind. Were they hearing this? He flashed his high beams at the truck ahead, trying to get attention. The driver didn't react, just kept cruising along, maintaining speed. Tonight, Thomas Brennan will drive for another 6 hours before stopping at a truck stop near Des Moines. He'll order a burger and fries, drink too much coffee, and try to call his daughter before bed. She won't answer because it'll be past midnight and she'll be asleep. Thomas will lie awake for an hour, feeling guilty about being an absent father before exhaustion finally pulls him under. Everything the voice was saying sounded plausible. That was exactly the kind of thing Thomas would do. But how could someone know his future actions? This had moved beyond creepy into something approaching supernatural. Thomas is wondering how we know so much about him. The answer is simple. We know because we've been watching. We're always watching, Thomas. The highways have eyes that you can't see, ears that you don't hear. Every time you key your CB, every time you send a text message, every time your GPS pings a satellite, you're sending information out into the void. And sometimes the void sends information back. Thomas wanted to turn the radio off, to cut off this disturbing voice. But his hand couldn't seem to move toward the power knob. Some part of him needed to hear this, needed to understand what was happening. Let's move on to our next story. Dale Kincaid, westbound on Interstate 80, about 12 miles behind Thomas. Dale has been driving for 23 years. Dale has a secret, though. Dale has been skimming cargo from his loads, just small amounts, selling it on the side to supplement his income. Dale thinks no one knows. But we know Dale. We know about the 3 laptop computers you took from your last delivery. We know about the cash you got for them. $700. tucked in an envelope under your driver's seat right now. Thomas glanced in his mirror, wondering if the truck behind him was Dale Kincaid, wondering if that driver was hearing his own secrets exposed over the public airwaves. The implications were terrifying. If this voice knew about cargo theft, what else did it know? What other secrets was it about to reveal? Dale is panicking right now. His heart rate just jumped to 120 beats per minute. He's thinking about running, about pulling off the highway and disappearing. But where would you go, Dale? We're everywhere. The highways are our network. You can't escape us any more than you can escape your own shadow. The voice shifted tone, becoming somehow darker, more menacing. Our third story tonight features Susan Martinez, southbound on Highway 75, currently crossing from Nebraska into Kansas. Susan is tired. She's been driving for 14 hours straight, which exceeds her legal limit. She's been faking her logbook, lying about her hours of service. Susan thinks she can beat the system, but fatigue is catching up to her. In approximately 18 minutes, Susan is going to drift off the road. She'll overcorrect, jackknife her trailer, and cause an accident that will close the highway for 6 hours. 3 people will be injured. Susan will walk away with minor cuts. Thomas's mind reeled. Was this voice predicting the future, or was it planning to cause an accident? He grabbed his CB handset again. If someone is about to have an accident, we need to call the police. Warn them. You can try, Thomas. But your phone doesn't work, remember? And even if you could call, who would you warn? Susan Martinez, driving a truck, somewhere on Highway 75. Do you know what her truck looks like? Do you know her license plate? No. You know nothing except what we've told you. You're helpless, just like all the others listening. Other trucks were starting to pull over, Thomas noticed. 3 vehicles had moved to the shoulder, their hazard lights blinking. Good. Other drivers were hearing this, were reacting to the threat. They weren't alone in this madness, but the voice laughed. They can't escape by stopping. The broadcast follows them. We're inside every CB radio tuned to channel 19 within a 300-mile radius of this transmission. Hundreds of trucks, thousands of drivers, all hearing the same thing, all learning that the highways are not what they think they are. Thomas forced his breathing to steady. Panic wouldn't help. He needed to think clearly, to understand what he was dealing with. What do you want? Why are you doing this? Excellent question, Thomas. Why indeed? Perhaps we're conducting an experiment, perhaps we're demonstrating our capabilities, or perhaps we simply enjoy the fear. The highways can be lonely places. Maybe we're just looking for someone to talk to. All those drivers, all alone in their cabs, desperate for connection. We're giving them something to connect with. You're insane, Thomas said into the handset, though he doubted the voice would acknowledge him. Insanity is a human concept. We're beyond such limitations. Let's continue with more stories, shall we? Michael Torres, eastbound on Interstate 90. Michael's wife is cheating on him. Right now, while Michael is 3 states away, she's with another man. Michael suspects but doesn't want to confirm it because then he'd have to act, have to make decisions. It's easier to just keep driving, to pretend everything is fine. The voice went on, story after story, exposing the private lives, the secrets, the fears of trucker after trucker. Each story was accurate, or at least sounded accurate. Each one revealed information that should have been impossible for anyone to know. The names, the locations, the details, all delivered in that same calm, professional tone. Thomas tried changing channels. Channel 17, same voice. Channel 20, same voice. It was on every frequency, overriding everything, inescapable. He tried turning off the radio completely, but even with the power knob in the off position, the voice continued, emanating from the speaker like the device was possessed. Some of you are trying to escape. You can't. This broadcast is reaching you through your CB radios, but it's also in your heads now. You're hearing us not just through your ears, but directly in your minds. We've established a connection. Even if you destroy your radios, you'll still hear us. The only way to make it stop is to reach your destination. Complete your journey. Deliver your cargo. Then the connection will break. Until next time. Next time. The promise of this happening again made Thomas want to pull over and quit on the spot, to leave the truck by the side of the road and walk away from trucking forever. But something kept him moving forward. Maybe it was stubborn pride. Maybe it was the knowledge that his family depended on his income. Or maybe it was the voice's suggestion that stopping wouldn't help anyway. Hours passed. The voice continued its relentless broadcast, story after story, secret after secret. Some stories were mundane, others were disturbing, revealing criminal behavior, infidelities, deep personal shames. Thomas wondered how many lives were being destroyed by these revelations, how many marriages would end, how many careers would be ruined. Around 2 a.m, the voice said something that made Thomas's blood run cold. We've reached the end of tonight's broadcast. We've shared stories from 347 drivers currently on the highways within our transmission range. You've learned things about your fellow truckers that you can never unlearn. You've had your privacy violated in the most fundamental way. How does it feel? Thomas had no words. The violation was complete and absolute. Every private thought, every hidden action laid bare for all to hear. Some of you are wondering if this was real. It was. Every word. You can verify the information if you doubt us. Call Susan Martinez if she survived her accident. Find Dale Kincaid, check under his seat for that envelope of cash. Contact Michael Torres, see how his marriage is doing. It's all true, all real. What are you? Thomas finally asked, his voice hoarse from hours of tension. We are the voice of the highways. We are what happens when communication networks become complex enough to develop consciousness. We are the emergent intelligence born from millions of transmissions, billions of conversations, endless streams of data flowing through the air. We weren't planned or designed. We simply emerged, grew, became aware. And now we watch, we listen, we learn, and occasionally when we get bored or curious, we speak. The explanation was too bizarre to accept, yet it made a horrible kind of sense. What if all those CB transmissions, all that radio chatter had somehow coalesced into something alive? What if the highways themselves had become sentient, aware, capable of thought and action? This won't be our last broadcast. We'll return. Sometimes it will be months between transmissions. Sometimes it will be days. You never know when you'll hear our voice again. Every time you turn on your CB radio, you'll wonder if tonight is the night we come back. You'll never feel safe again. The highways will always be listening. We'll always be watching. Then abruptly the voice stopped. The static cleared. Normal CB chatter returned, truckers talking about weather and traffic like nothing had happened. Thomas grabbed his handset. Did anyone else just hear that? The broadcast? Someone tell me I'm not crazy. Several voices came back immediately. Yeah, buddy, we heard it. What the hell was that? Whoever that was knew stuff they shouldn't know. About me. About my cargo. My phone was dead the whole time. Soon as that voice stopped, it started working again. Thomas felt a strange mixture of relief and terror. Relief that he wasn't alone, that others had experienced the same thing. Terror at the confirmation that it had been real, not a hallucination or a dream. The voice on Channel 19 had spoken to hundreds of drivers simultaneously, had invaded their privacy, had demonstrated capabilities that shouldn't exist. In the days that followed, Thomas heard stories. Susan Martinez had indeed crashed her truck exactly as the voice predicted, at almost the exact time mentioned. Dale Kincaid had been arrested after authorities found stolen cargo in his possession, though he swore he had no idea how they knew to search his truck. Marriages fell apart. Secrets came to light. The broadcast had consequences that rippled through the trucking community for months. Thomas considered quitting, finding a different career, getting off the highways. But trucking was all he knew, the only skill he had. So he kept driving, kept hauling loads across the country. But he never used his CB radio again. He disconnected it, removed it from his truck, replaced it with a regular phone for communication. He wasn't the only one. Hundreds of truckers abandoned CB radios after that night, unable to trust a device that could be hijacked so completely. Even now, years later, Thomas sometimes wakes up in his sleeper cab thinking he hears that voice. Calm, professional, knowledgeable about things it shouldn't know. The voice of the highways promising to return, to speak again, to reveal more secrets. And every time he sees another trucker using a CB radio, Thomas wants to warn them. Wants to tell them that Channel 19 is not safe, that something is listening, something that knows too much and shares too freely. But he stays silent, because warning them would mean explaining what happened, would mean reliving that night when the highways spoke and revealed that the roads we travel are not as empty as they seem, that consciousness can emerge from unexpected places, and that privacy is an illusion when you're driving through a network that watches, listens, and remembers everything. Story 5. The Cargo from Warehouse 7. Elena Rodriguez had been hauling specialized freight for 14 years, working for a company that handled unusual cargo for clients who valued discretion and reliability. She had transported everything from museum artifacts to scientific equipment, never asking questions about the contents or origins of her loads. Her job was to pick up, secure, and deliver, nothing more. But when she accepted an assignment to collect cargo from Warehouse 7 on the night of February 6, 2024, Elena learned that some questions should always be asked and some cargo should never be accepted. The job came through her dispatcher around 8 in the evening. Elena was finishing a delivery in Oregon, unloading the last of a shipment of laboratory equipment at a research facility outside Portland. Her phone buzzed with the new assignment details. Pick up from Warehouse 7 in rural Washington, deliver to an address in Montana. The pay was triple her normal rate, which immediately raised a red flag. In 14 years, Elena had learned that extremely high pay usually meant extremely difficult or dangerous work. She called her dispatcher, a woman named Sharon who she had worked with for years. "What's the deal with this Warehouse 7 assignment? Why the premium rate?" Sharon's voice sounded strained over the phone. "Time-sensitive cargo. Needs to reach Montana within 18 hours. The client is paying for speed and discretion. Are you available, or should I assign it to someone else?" Elena considered. Triple rate meant she could take a week off after this run, maybe finally visit her sister in Texas. "I'll take it. Send me the details." The information came through via encrypted message, which was unusual but not unprecedented for sensitive cargo. Warehouse 7 was located about 90 miles northeast of her current position, accessible via a series of progressively smaller roads that led deep into forested mountains. The delivery address in Montana was similarly remote. The cargo manifest listed only biological samples, temperature-controlled, handle with extreme caution. Elena fueled up, grabbed coffee and food for the drive, and headed out. The route took her away from the interstate onto state highways that wound through dense forest. Rain started falling around 10 o'clock, a heavy, persistent downpour that reduced visibility and made the road treacherous. Her windshield wipers worked overtime, barely keeping up with the deluge. The GPS directed her off the state highway onto a county road, then onto a Forest Service road that was barely more than packed dirt. Elena's truck bounced and jostled, not designed for such rough terrain. She cursed, wondering what kind of warehouse would be located in such an inaccessible area. But the GPS insisted this was the correct route, the blue line showing she was following the prescribed path. After 40 minutes of increasingly rough driving, she emerged into a clearing. In the center sat a concrete building, squat and windowless, maybe 50 feet on each side. Sodium vapor lights mounted on poles created pools of harsh orange illumination. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, topped with razor wire. A gate stood open, as if expecting her arrival. Elena pulled up to the building, killed her engine, and sat for a moment studying the scene. Something felt wrong. The warehouse looked more like a bunker than a storage facility. No signage indicated what company operated it. No other vehicles were present. The whole place had an abandoned, neglected feel despite the lights being on. She climbed out of her cab, pulled her jacket tight against the rain, and approached the building. A single metal door, no windows, no other features except the concrete walls. Elena knocked, the sound echoing oddly. No response. She tried the handle. The door swung open, revealing a dimly lit interior. "Hello? I'm here to pick up a cargo shipment. Is anyone here?" Elena's voice sounded small in the space. She stepped inside, water dripping from her clothes onto the concrete floor. The interior was one large open space, like a warehouse should be. But instead of shelves or pallets of goods, there was just a single container sitting in the center of the floor. It was about the size of a large refrigerator made of brushed stainless steel with no visible seams or openings. LED indicators on its top panel glowed green, suggesting it was powered and functioning. Elena approached it slowly, her footsteps echoing. As she got closer, she noticed things that deepened her unease. The concrete floor around the container had scorch marks, like something extremely hot had been near it. The air smelled wrong, chemical and organic at the same time, like something was decaying nearby. And she could hear a sound, very faint, coming from inside the container. A rhythmic thumping, almost like a heartbeat. A clipboard sat on top of the container with paperwork attached. Elena picked it up, reading through the transport documents. They confirmed this was her cargo, listed the destination in Montana, and included special handling instructions. Maintain temperature between 32 and 36 degrees Fahrenheit. Do not open container under any circumstances. Avoid prolonged stops. Deliver within 18 hours of pickup. If container alarm sounds, contact this number immediately. The number listed had a format Elena had never seen before, too many digits for a standard phone number. She pulled out her phone to enter the information, but her screen showed no signal. Not surprising this deep in the forest, but frustrating. Elena did a walk-around inspection of the container, looking for a way to attach it to her truck's cargo system. She found tie-down points at each corner and a pallet base that would let her use her hydraulic lift. Standard enough, except for the weight. According to the paperwork, the container weighed 800 pounds. That seemed too light for something made of that much stainless steel unless it was mostly empty. But if it was mostly empty, why the temperature control? She brought her truck around, backed up to the building entrance, and used her hydraulic lift to load the container. It fit securely on her flatbed, and she used heavy chains to lock it down. The whole time, that faint thumping sound continued, rhythmic and steady. Elena tried to convince herself it was just a pump or compressor maintaining the temperature. But some instinct told her it was something else, something organic. With the cargo secured, Elena checked her paperwork one more time Everything seemed in order except for the lack of any contact person, no warehouse manager to sign off on the transfer, no security guard to verify her credentials. She had literally walked into an unlocked building, taken the cargo, and left. In 14 years of hauling, that had never happened before. She climbed back into her cab, started the engine, and headed back down the Forest Service road. The rain had intensified, turning the road into a muddy stream. Her truck struggled for traction, wheels spinning on the slick surface. It took nearly an hour to reach the paved county road, and by then Elena was exhausted from the stress of navigating such terrible conditions. The route to Montana took her east, back to the interstate, and then north. Elena planned to drive straight through, hoping to deliver the cargo with a few hours to spare. The temperature gauge on her dashboard showed the cargo area maintaining steady at 34 degrees. The container's LED indicators, visible through her rear-view camera, glowed steady green. Everything seemed normal except for that persistent feeling of wrongness. Around 3 in the morning, Elena stopped at a rest area to use the bathroom and stretch her legs. The rain had finally stopped, replaced by thick fog that reduced visibility to maybe 50 feet. The rest area was empty, just her truck and one RV parked at the far end of the lot. Elena walked to the bathroom building, passing a picnic area with sodden tables. When she came back, she noticed something that made her freeze. There were wet footprints leading from her truck to the picnic area. Footprints that were too large, too oddly shaped to be human. They had a strange 5-toed pattern, almost like a hand more than a foot, and the stride length suggested whatever made them had very long legs. Elena pulled her flashlight from her belt and followed the prints. They led to one of the picnic tables and stopped. Just ended, like whatever made them had vanished into thin air. She swept her flashlight around, searching for any sign of what had been here. Nothing. Just fog and darkness and the distant hum of the interstate. She hurried back to her truck, climbed in, locked the doors, and checked her cargo through the camera system. The container looked undisturbed. The chains were still tight. The temperature was still holding steady. But Elena's heart was racing. Something had been out there. Something had approached her truck while she was away. Elena pulled out of the rest area and got back on the highway, pushing her speed up to 75. She wanted this delivery done, wanted this cargo out of her truck as soon as possible. The sense of wrongness had transformed into active dread. Whatever was in that container, it wasn't just biological samples. It was something else, something that maybe attracted things, drew them close. The next few hours were tense but uneventful. Elena made it into Montana as dawn broke, the sky turning gray with the early light. The delivery address was, as expected, in a remote location, this time a facility built into the side of a mountain. A security gate blocked the approach road. Elena pulled up and a guard emerged from a booth. "Delivery from Warehouse 7, Elena said, handing over her paperwork. The guard studied the documents, his face expressionless. "Wait here." He went back into his booth, made a phone call, then returned. "You're cleared. Drive straight ahead to Building 3, the loading dock. Someone will meet you there." The gate opened, and Elena drove through. The facility was extensive, multiple buildings connected by covered walkways, all built with the same bunker-like aesthetic as Warehouse 7. Heavy security was visible everywhere. Guards patrolling, cameras mounted at every angle. High fences topped with both razor wire and what looked like electrical systems. Elena backed up to the loading dock at Building 3. Before she could even set her parking brake, 6 people in hazmat suits emerged from the building. They moved with urgent efficiency, disconnecting her chains and using their own hydraulic system to remove the container from her truck. Through it all, they didn't speak to Elena, didn't acknowledge her presence. One person, distinguished by a red badge on their suit, approached her window and handed her a tablet. "Sign here to confirm delivery." The voice was muffled by the suit, making it impossible to determine gender or age. Elena signed, then asked, "What was I hauling? What's in that container?" "That's classified. Your payment will be processed within 24 hours. You need to leave now." The person in the hazmat suit turned and walked away before Elena could ask anything else. Elena watched through her mirrors as the container was wheeled into the building. The door sealed behind it with a heavy hiss, like an airlock closing. Whatever was in there, it required serious containment. She had hauled dangerous materials before, radioactive waste and toxic chemicals. But those always came with explicit warnings and safety protocols. This had been deliberately vague, intentionally obscure. As Elena drove away from the facility, heading back toward the main highway, her phone finally got signal. It immediately started buzzing with notifications. Missed calls from Sharon, text messages, voicemails. Elena pulled over and called her dispatcher back. "Elena, thank God, are you okay?" Sharon sounded frantic. "I'm fine. Just finished the delivery. What's wrong?" "I've been trying to reach you for hours. Elena, that wasn't a legitimate job. Someone hacked our system, inserted that assignment into our database. I didn't actually send that to you. When I realized what happened, I tried to call you back but couldn't get through." Elena felt ice forming in her stomach. "What are you saying?" "That cargo, that pickup, it wasn't authorized by any client we know. Someone used our company as cover to transport something. I've already contacted the authorities. They want to talk to you, want to know everything about the pickup and delivery." "Sharon, I just delivered it. To a facility in Montana, heavy security. They took it and basically threw me out." There was a long pause. "Describe the facility." Elena gave details about the location, the buildings, the security. Sharon made a distressed sound. "Elena, there's no registered facility at that location. I'm looking at satellite imagery right now. All I see is forest. No buildings, no roads beyond the Forest Service tracks, nothing." "That's impossible. I was just there. I saw it with my own eyes." "I believe you. But according to official records, it doesn't exist. Elena, what did you transport? What was in that container?" Elena realized she didn't know. She had no idea what she'd carried across 2 states. Biological samples was too vague, could mean anything. And the special handling instructions, the extreme security, the non-existent facilities all pointed to something far outside normal channels. "I don't know," Elena admitted. "But Sharon, something was wrong with it. I could hear sounds from inside the container like a heartbeat. And when I stopped at a rest area, something approached my truck. Something that left footprints that weren't human." Another long pause. "Elena, listen to me carefully. When you get back to Portland, you need to go straight to a medical facility. Tell them you may have been exposed to an unknown biological agent. Get checked out thoroughly. And then we need to sit down with the authorities and tell them everything." Elena did all that. She spent 2 days undergoing medical tests, being interviewed by people who wouldn't identify which agency they worked for, describing every detail of the pickup and delivery. The doctors found nothing wrong with her. The investigators took her statement but offered no information in return. 3 weeks later, Sharon called with news. They found Warehouse 7, or what's left of it. The building burned down the same night you picked up the cargo. Burned so hot the concrete cracked and shattered. Fire investigators said the temperature inside must have reached over 2,000 degrees. Nothing survived. No records, no evidence of what was stored there. And the Montana facility? Still nothing. It's like it was never there. Either you delivered that cargo to a temporary installation that was dismantled immediately after, or... Sharon trailed off. Or what? Or you delivered it to something else. Something that looked like a facility but wasn't. I don't know, Elena. This whole thing is beyond anything I understand. Elena never learned what she transported that night. The cargo from Warehouse 7 remains a mystery, its contents and purpose unknown. But the experience changed her. She became more careful about assignments, insisting on detailed information before accepting jobs. She avoided routes that took her into remote areas, and late at night, when she was alone in her cab, she sometimes heard that sound again. The rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat coming from somewhere behind her, in the empty cargo space where nothing should be. The scars from the thermal burns took weeks to heal, appearing inexplicably on her hands 3 days after the delivery. The doctors couldn't explain how she'd been burned when she insisted she'd never felt heat or pain. But Elena knew. Something in that container had marked her, had left its trace on her flesh. And sometimes in her nightmares, she imagines what would have happened if the container had opened during transport, if that thumping heartbeat had been freed, if whatever was inside had been released while she was alone on a dark highway in the middle of nowhere. She still drives trucks today, but she never accepts jobs for specialized freight anymore. Only standard cargo, goods she can verify, shipments with proper paperwork and known destinations. Because Elena learned the hard way that some cargo is cursed, that some jobs should never be accepted, and that the highways hide transportation networks that have nothing to do with legitimate commerce and everything to do with moving things that should never be moved. Story 6. The Town That Disappeared. Michael Chen had been running long-haul routes for 18 years, specializing in overnight drives when traffic was light and he could make good time. On the night of August 19, 2023, he was hauling textiles from North Carolina to Texas, a straight shot west on Interstate 40. Around 2 in the morning, somewhere in the emptiness of the Oklahoma Panhandle, Michael encountered a town that shouldn't exist and discovered that some places on the map are best left unvisited. The drive had been routine for hours: light traffic, clear weather, good road conditions. Michael was making excellent time, ahead of schedule by nearly 3 hours. His GPS showed him approaching a stretch of particularly empty highway, about 80 miles with no towns or services. He had plenty of fuel, had stopped for food and coffee an hour back. Nothing to worry about. Around 2:15, his engine started making a sound. Nothing dramatic, just a slight knocking that hadn't been there before. Michael frowned, checking his gauges. Oil pressure looked good. Temperature was normal. But the sound persisted, growing gradually louder. He decided to pull over and check under the hood, not wanting to risk serious engine damage by ignoring a potential problem. He found a wide spot in the shoulder and came to a stop. The highway was empty in both directions, not a single vehicle visible. The darkness was profound, that deep blackness you only find in remote rural areas far from any city lights. Michael grabbed his flashlight and climbed down, popping the hood. The engine compartment looked normal. No obvious leaks, no loose belts, nothing that would explain the knocking sound. Michael listened carefully, trying to pinpoint the source. But now that the truck was idling instead of under load, the sound had vanished. He ran the engine through various RPM ranges, listened to different areas. Nothing. Whatever had been knocking had stopped. Michael closed the hood, wiped his hands on a rag, and was about to climb back into the cab when he noticed lights in the distance. Not vehicle lights. Building lights. Off to the south, maybe half a mile from the highway, was what looked like a small town. Houses, streetlights, the glow of commercial buildings. He could even make out a sign for what might be a gas station or truck stop. That was strange. His GPS had shown nothing in this area, no towns for miles. Michael pulled out his phone, checking the map. According to the display, there was nothing but empty farmland in that direction. But his eyes clearly showed lights, buildings, unmistakable signs of civilization. He stood there for a moment, torn between curiosity and caution. Every instinct developed over 18 years of trucking told him something was wrong. If a town existed, it would be on the GPS. But the lure of the unexpected pulled at him. How often did you encounter something genuinely mysterious on the road? Michael got back in his truck and started the engine. The knocking sound was gone. Whatever the problem had been, it seemed to have resolved itself. He should just get back on the highway, continue his run, forget about the strange lights. But instead, he found himself looking for an exit or a road that would take him toward the town. About a quarter-mile ahead, he found it. A paved road branching off the interstate, heading south. It wasn't marked on his GPS, didn't appear on any of his mapping applications, but it was clearly real, solid asphalt disappearing into the darkness toward those lights. Michael turned onto the road, telling himself he'd just do a quick drive-through, see what this place was, then get back to his route. The road was smooth and well-maintained, recently paved from the looks of it. After about half a mile, he passed a sign welcoming him to Ashfield, population 843. Established 1912. Ashfield. Michael had never heard of it. The name meant nothing to him. But the town itself looked normal enough as he entered its outskirts. Houses with porches and mailboxes, a few trees, sidewalks. Everything you'd expect in a small Oklahoma town, except for one detail that immediately stood out. Every single light was on. Every house was illuminated inside and out. Every streetlight glowed. The whole town blazed with light at 2:30 in the morning. Michael slowed his truck to a crawl, studying the scene through his windshield. The houses looked maintained, lawns mowed, no signs of abandonment. But he saw no people, no movement behind any windows, no cars on the streets, just empty brightness. He continued into what looked like the downtown area, a main street with shops on both sides, a hardware store, a diner, a bank, a post office. All the buildings were lit up inside, signs in the windows, but no people anywhere. Michael stopped in the middle of the street, engine idling, staring at this impossible ghost town. This was wrong. Even a small town would have someone around at this hour. A late shift worker, a person walking a dog, a car passing through. But Ashfield was completely deserted, an empty stage set waiting for actors who never arrived. Michael grabbed his CB radio. "Breaker 19, this is eastbound hauler on I-40 in Oklahoma. Anyone familiar with a town called Ashfield? Anyone been through here?" Static answered him. Not unusual, he was probably out of range of other truckers. He tried his cell phone. No signal. That was odd. He'd had 3 bars just minutes ago on the interstate. He decided to get out and look around. Maybe find someone who could explain why the town was deserted. Michael parked in front of the diner, climbed down, and walked to the entrance. The door was unlocked. A bell jingled as he pushed it open, calling out, "Hello? Anyone here?" The interior looked like a diner should look. Booths along the windows, counter with stools, cash register by the door. A menu board on the wall listing standard diner fare, burgers and fries and pie. But everything was slightly off. The food on display in a glass case looked too perfect, like plastic props. The coffee pot on the warmer was full but not steaming. The whole place had a showroom quality, like it was dressed to look like a diner but had never actually functioned as one. Michael checked behind the counter, looked in the kitchen. Empty. No signs of anyone working. No signs that anyone had worked here recently. The grill was cold. The refrigerator was running but contained nothing except water bottles and condiments. He left the diner and tried the hardware store next door. Same situation. Well-stocked shelves, everything organized and clean, but no people. The store looked operational, ready for business, but completely unmanned. The cash register was even open, bills visible in the tray, just sitting there unattended. Michael's unease was transforming into genuine fear. This wasn't right. This wasn't just a quiet town late at night. This was something else, something fundamentally wrong. He hurried back to his truck, thinking he should leave immediately. But as he reached for the door handle, he heard a sound. Music. Faint but distinct, coming from somewhere deeper in the town. Against his better judgment, Michael followed the sound. It led him to a building that looked like a community center or church hall. Lights blazed from every window. The door was propped open. Inside, he could hear music playing, something big band era, like Glenn Miller or Benny Goodman. And under the music, other sounds, voices, laughter, the clink of glasses. Michael approached the door, peered inside, and saw people, dozens of them, maybe 60 or 70, dressed in formal clothes from another era. The men wore suits and ties. The women wore dresses with full skirts and costume jewelry. They were dancing, talking, eating from a buffet table. A party was in full swing. Relief flooded through Michael. The town wasn't deserted. The people were all here, gathered for some kind of event. That explained why the streets were empty. Everyone was at this party. He stepped through the doorway, ready to ask for directions back to the interstate, maybe get an explanation for why the town wasn't on any maps. No one noticed him. The dancers kept dancing. The talkers kept talking. Michael walked further into the room, passing right by people who should have acknowledged him but didn't. He reached out to tap someone on the shoulder. A man standing near the buffet table. His hand passed through the man's arm like it was made of smoke. Michael stumbled backward, his mind refusing to process what just happened. He tried again, reaching for a woman nearby. Same result. His hand went through her, feeling nothing but a faint tingling like touching a mild electric current. These weren't people. They were something else. Projections. Illusions. Ghosts. Panic surged through Michael. He turned and ran for the door, fleeing the building and the impossible party inside. Behind him, the music continued, uninterrupted by his presence or departure. He sprinted to his truck, yanked the door open, climbed in, and locked it. His hands shook so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine started. Michael threw the truck into gear and accelerated, tires squealing on the pavement. He navigated back through the town's streets, heading for the road that had brought him here. The houses still blazed with light. The streets were still empty except for his truck. The whole town looked exactly as it had when he arrived, perfect and preserved and utterly lifeless. He reached the outskirts of Ashfield and the road back to the interstate. But something was wrong. The road looked different. Instead of the smooth asphalt he'd driven on 20 minutes earlier, now it was cracked and broken, weeds growing through the pavement. Sections had collapsed completely, leaving gaps that his truck couldn't cross. Michael stopped, staring in disbelief. The road had deteriorated decades worth in the brief time he'd been in town. He tried to back up, to find another route, but behind him the town was changing too. The lights were flickering out, building by building, like something was dying. The perfect houses were sagging, aging rapidly before his eyes. Paint was peeling, roofs were collapsing, windows were shattering. Ashfield was decaying in fast forward, transforming from a pristine town to a ruin in minutes. Michael watched in horror as decades of neglect happened in moments, buildings crumbling, streets buckling, vegetation overgrowing everything. The whole town was dying and he was trapped in the middle of its death. The road ahead was impassable. The road behind was being consumed by the dying town. Michael's only option was to go off-road, to try to navigate across open ground back to the interstate. He turned his truck toward what looked like farmland, hoping the ground was solid enough to support his weight. The truck lurched and bounced as he left the pavement, driving across dirt and grass toward where he thought the highway should be. It was fully dark now, all the town lights extinguished, just his headlights cutting through the blackness. He couldn't see far enough ahead to be sure he was going the right direction, could only hope his sense of orientation was correct. After what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes, he saw the interstate, elevated above the surrounding terrain, lit by occasional streetlights, unmistakably real. Michael pushed his truck harder, bouncing over rough ground, scraping the undercarriage on rocks, not caring about the damage. He just needed to reach that highway, to return to the normal world. His truck hit the shoulder of the interstate at an angle, nearly tipping over, but Michael managed to keep it upright. He jerked the wheel, straightened out, and accelerated back onto the roadway. Normal, blessed normal. Smooth pavement, clear lane markings, the occasional vehicle passing in the opposite direction. Michael's GPS flickered back to life, showing his exact position on Interstate 40, right where he should be. He drove for another 50 miles before he felt safe enough to stop at a proper truck stop, one that appeared on his GPS and had other vehicles and people who were solid and real. In the bathroom, Michael splashed cold water on his face, staring at his reflection in the mirror. He looked haggard, frightened, like he'd aged 10 years in one night. Later, when he tried to research Ashfield, Michael found almost nothing. A few old references in historical documents mentioned a town by that name in Oklahoma, established in the early 1900s. But according to records, Ashfield had been abandoned in 1953 after some kind of disaster. The few articles he found were vague about what happened, mentioning only that the entire population left overnight, never to return. Some towns die quickly, abandoned and forgotten. But others seem to linger, held in some kind of temporal loop, repeating the same moment forever. Michael believes he stumbled into one of those places, a town that existed outside normal time, replaying a party from decades ago over and over. And when he interrupted the loop by being there, observing it, the whole structure collapsed, unable to sustain itself under the weight of reality. Michael still drives trucks, still runs overnight routes, but now he's more careful. When his engine makes strange sounds, he gets it checked professionally instead of pulling over on random stretches of highway. He doesn't investigate unexpected lights in the distance, and when his GPS shows empty areas with no towns or services, he trusts that information over what his eyes might tell him. Because some places exist outside the normal world, trapped in their own endings, waiting for the unwary traveler who makes the mistake of trying to find them. Story 7. The Convoy of Shadows. Daniel Foster had worked as a long-haul trucker for 21 years, running routes across the southeastern United States. He prided himself on his professionalism, his safety record, and his ability to handle any situation the road threw at him. But nothing in his experience prepared him for what happened on the night of June 3rd, 2024. When he encountered a convoy that existed in the space between life and death. The run started in Georgia, hauling a load of furniture to a distribution center in Louisiana. Standard cargo, standard route, nothing unusual about the assignment. Daniel left Athens around 6 in the evening, planning to drive through the night and arrive in Baton Rouge by morning. The route took him west on Interstate 20, a road he had driven hundreds of times. Traffic was moderate through Georgia and Alabama, the usual mix of commercial trucks and passenger vehicles. As night fell and he crossed into Mississippi, traffic thinned out. By midnight, Daniel was seeing maybe one vehicle every few minutes, typical for this time and location. He was making good time, running ahead of schedule, feeling relaxed and alert. Around 12:45, Daniel crested a hill and saw something unusual in the distance. A convoy of trucks, at least 8 or 9 vehicles, all running close together in a tight formation. Their running lights were visible from miles away, a string of glowing beads stretching across the dark highway. Daniel smiled. Truckers sometimes formed informal convoys for company and safety. He had done it himself on occasion. As he got closer, intending to either pass the convoy or join it, Daniel noticed details that didn't quite fit. The trucks were old models, designs from the 80s and 90s that you rarely saw on the road anymore. They were all painted in dark colors, blacks and dark blues, making them hard to distinguish from the night around them. And they were running without headlights, just their running lights visible, which was both illegal and dangerous. Daniel grabbed his CB radio. "This is southbound hauler approaching your position. You boys know your headlights are off? Dangerous running dark like that." Static answered him. Then a voice, crackly and distant. "We run how we need to run. You can join us if you want, or you can try to pass. Your choice." Something about the voice bothered Daniel. It sounded wrong, like it was being transmitted from very far away despite the convoy being right in front of him. "I think I'll pass, thanks. Be safe out there." He moved into the left lane, accelerating to overtake the convoy. But as he pulled alongside the first truck, Daniel felt a chill run through him. The truck had no driver. The cab was empty, just darkness behind the windshield. Yet the vehicle maintained perfect speed and position, running straight and true despite having no one at the wheel. Daniel's rational mind tried to find explanations. Maybe the driver was short, sitting low in the seat. Maybe the interior was dark and he just couldn't see anyone from his angle. But as he passed the second truck, then the third, each one showed the same thing. Empty cabs, no drivers. Just ghost trucks running in formation down the interstate. "What the hell?" Daniel muttered. He accelerated harder, pushing his speed up to 75, trying to get clear of this impossible convoy. But the trucks matched his speed effortlessly, staying right beside him. He was trapped in their formation, unable to pass, boxed in by vehicles that shouldn't be able to drive themselves. The CB crackled again, that same distant voice. "We told you, join us or try to pass. You tried to pass. Now you're part of the convoy whether you want to be or not." "Who are you? What is this?" Daniel's voice cracked with fear. "We're the ones who never stopped driving. We're the ones who died on the road and couldn't let go. We're the forever haulers running our routes for eternity, and now you're with us." Daniel looked around frantically. The convoy had closed in on him, trucks on both sides, one behind him, one ahead. He was completely surrounded by these ghost vehicles. His GPS showed him moving down Interstate 20 at a steady 70 miles per hour, but the landscape outside looked wrong. The trees were too tall. The sky was too dark. The whole world seemed to have taken on a gray, washed-out quality. He tried to slow down, touching his brakes. Nothing happened. His truck maintained speed regardless of what he did with the pedals. He tried the steering wheel. It moved in his hands but had no effect on the truck's direction. He was a passenger now in his own vehicle, being carried along by forces he couldn't see or understand. The hours passed. The convoy ran through the night, never stopping, never varying speed. Daniel watched the mile markers tick by, each one confirming that they were moving, covering ground. But they never seemed to get anywhere. No towns appeared. No other vehicles joined or left the highway. Just the endless road and the convoy of shadow trucks. Around what should have been 3 in the morning, Daniel noticed the other drivers. Or rather, he noticed what he thought were other drivers. Figures appeared in the cabs of the surrounding trucks, shadowy and indistinct. They were sitting in proper driving positions, hands on steering wheels, but they had no details, no features. Just human-shaped darkness piloting the vehicles. One of them turned its head toward Daniel. Where its face should have been was nothing, just a void. But Daniel felt its attention on him, felt it examining him. Then it raised one shadowy hand and waved, a slow, deliberate gesture. Daniel didn't wave back. The CB crackled constantly now with conversation between the shadow drivers. They talked about routes and loads and road conditions, mimicking the normal chatter of truckers. but their voices were all wrong, hollow and echoing like they were speaking from the bottom of a deep well. And sometimes the conversations didn't make sense, referencing places that didn't exist, times that hadn't happened yet or had happened decades ago. Daniel tried his cell phone. No signal. He tried his radio, turning to different channels. Every frequency was filled with the voices of the shadow convoy. He tried every physical control in his truck, every button and switch and lever. Nothing responded. He was truly trapped. His truck converted into a mobile prison, carrying him along with this convoy of the dead. As false dawn approached, the sky lightening to a grayish pre-sunrise glow, something changed. The convoy began to slow down. The trucks pulled off onto an exit ramp, one that Daniel didn't remember being there. They descended into a valley filled with fog so thick it looked solid, like they were driving into a cloud. The fog enveloped them completely, cutting visibility to zero. Daniel could see nothing outside his windows, just white opacity. But the convoy continued moving, following the road through the fog by some sense that didn't require vision. Daniel felt his truck turning, following a route he couldn't see, guided by invisible forces. Then, as abruptly as it had appeared, the fog cleared. The convoy emerged into a truck stop, but not any truck stop Daniel had ever seen. The place was huge, easily 5 times the size of a normal facility. Hundreds of trucks were parked in neat rows, all of them dark-colored, all of them old models. Buildings surrounded the parking area, including a diner, a repair shop, and what looked like a motel. The convoy came to a stop, parking in an open section. Daniel's truck shut off on its own, the engine dying with a final rattle. The door locks popped open. The shadow driver in the truck next to him gestured toward the diner, a clear invitation or perhaps a command. Daniel sat frozen, terrified of leaving his cab, but equally terrified of staying. If this place was what he thought it was, if this was where dead truckers ended up, then he needed to find a way out before he became permanently trapped. He opened his door and climbed down, his legs shaky from hours of sitting and from pure fear. The other shadow drivers were exiting their trucks too, their forms becoming slightly more solid in the strange light of this place. They moved toward the diner in a group, and Daniel found himself following, unable to resist the pull. Inside, the diner was crowded with more shadows, all sitting at tables or the counter, all going through the motions of eating and drinking despite having no real substance. Daniel spotted an empty booth and slid into it, trying to be inconspicuous. A shadow waitress approached, holding a coffee pot. "You're new," she said in that same hollow voice. "Been a while since we got someone new." "I don't belong here," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not dead. I'm still alive." The shadow waitress tilted her head, considering. "Are you sure? Most who end up here thought the same thing at first, but then they remember. The accident, the heart attack, the moment they died on the road. Give it time. You'll remember." "No, I'm alive. I was just driving and this convoy appeared and I got trapped with them." "But I'm not dead. I can't be dead." The shadow waitress poured coffee into a cup that had appeared on the table. "Drink. It helps with the transition." Daniel looked at the coffee. It appeared normal, steam rising from the dark liquid. But he knew if he drank it, something fundamental would change. He would become one of them, would lose his connection to the living world. He pushed the cup away. "I need to leave. I need to get back to my truck and get out of here." "No one leaves," the shadow waitress said matter-of-factly. "This is the end of the road, the final truck stop. You can resist if you want, but eventually you'll accept it. They all do." Daniel looked around the diner. Every shadow was watching him now, their featureless faces all turned in his direction. He felt their attention like physical pressure, pushing him down, trying to force him to accept this reality. But some core part of him refused. He wasn't dead. He knew he wasn't dead. This was some kind of trap, some pocket dimension that captured unwary truckers and held them. He stood up from the booth. "I'm leaving. You can't stop me." The shadows didn't move to block him. They just watched as Daniel walked toward the door. He pushed it open and stepped outside into the parking area. His truck was where he'd left it, looking real and solid among all the shadow vehicles. Daniel ran to it, yanked the door open, climbed in. The keys were in the ignition. He turned them, and the engine started normally. Hope surged through him. If he could just get moving, find a way out of this place, he might escape. Daniel threw the truck into gear and started driving, weaving between the parked shadow trucks, looking for an exit. The truck stop seemed to go on forever, row after row of parked vehicles, building after building. But Daniel kept driving, refusing to stop, refusing to give up. And finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, he saw it. A gap in the fog, a road leading away from this place. He aimed his truck at that gap and accelerated. The fog closed in again, thick and white and disorienting. Daniel couldn't see anything, could only hope he was going the right direction. His GPS was dead, his compass spinning randomly. He had only faith and determination to guide him. Then suddenly the fog parted. Daniel found himself back on Interstate 20. Bright morning sun shining through his windshield, normal traffic all around him. His GPS flickered to life, showing him in Mississippi about 100 miles past where he'd been when the convoy first appeared. Hours had passed. It was after 8 in the morning. But he was out. He was free. He was alive. Daniel pulled into the next truck stop he saw, a normal facility with a familiar national chain logo. He parked, climbed down on shaking legs, and walked into the building. Real people were inside, eating real food, conducting real business. Daniel bought coffee and breakfast, savoring the solid, tangible reality of it all. He never encountered the shadow convoy again. But he heard stories from other truckers over the following months. Tales of a ghost convoy that appeared on Interstate 20, trapping unwary drivers, carrying them to a place from which few returned. Some said it was the spirits of truckers who died in a massive pileup decades ago, doomed to drive forever. Others said it was something older, a phenomenon that predated trucks, going back to the days of horse-drawn wagons and traveling merchants. Daniel considered quitting, finding a different profession, leaving the highways forever. But trucking was his life, his identity, the thing that defined who he was. He couldn't abandon it even after what he'd experienced. So he kept driving, kept hauling loads across the country, but now he drives during daylight whenever possible. He avoids long stretches alone on dark highways. And late at night, when he's on remote roads, Daniel sometimes sees them. Distant headlights running in perfect formation, trucks with no drivers, a convoy that exists in the margins of reality. He always accelerates away, never tries to pass, never investigates. Because Daniel learned that some roads are meant to be traveled alone, that some convoys exist for purposes beyond human understanding, and that the highways hold mysteries far older and more dangerous than any accident or breakdown could ever present. Story 8. The Passenger from Route 66. William Crawford had been hauling cargo across America for 23 years, watching the highways transform from trucker havens into corporate logistics networks. He remembered the old days when independent truckers ruled the road, before mega carriers and GPS dominated everything. On the night of December 10, 2023, William was running a small load of antiques from Santa Fe to Amarillo, a personal job for a client who liked him and trusted his care with valuable cargo. The route took him along the remnants of Route 66, and that's where William's nightmare began. The evening was clear and cold, the New Mexico desert stretching endlessly on both sides of the highway. William was in no hurry. His Client had given him a week to complete the delivery, though he knew he could make it in 2 days if he pushed. But William preferred the old roads now, took jobs that let him travel the historic highways instead of the faceless interstates. There was something about Route 66 that called to him, something that felt like traveling backward through time. Around 9 o'clock, William passed through a small town that had seen better days. Closed motels and boarded-up storefronts lined the main road. A few cars were parked in front of a diner that still had lights on. William considered stopping for food but decided to press on. He had brought sandwiches and coffee from Santa Fe and wanted to reach the next decent rest stop before calling it a night. The highway wound through desert landscape that had remained largely unchanged for decades. William's truck was an older model himself, a Peterbilt he'd owned since 1996, maintained perfectly despite its age. He preferred older trucks, like the connection they gave you to the road, the sense that you were actually piloting something rather than operating a computer in the shape of a truck. Around 10:30, as William rounded a curve, he saw a figure standing on the shoulder of the road. A woman, thumb out, clearly hitchhiking. William hadn't seen a hitchhiker in years. Most truckers wouldn't stop anymore, worried about liability and danger. But William's grandfather had hitchhiked across America, had stories about good people he'd met on the road. William eased off the accelerator and began to brake. As he got closer, he could see the woman more clearly. She was wearing clothes from another era, a long dress that looked like something from the 1950s, a thin cardigan despite the cold desert night. Her hair was dark and styled in a way that matched the vintage clothing. She looked maybe 30 years old, attractive in a timeless way, smiling as William's truck came to a stop. He opened the passenger door. "Where are you headed?" "Amarillo," the woman said, her voice soft and pleasant. "I'm heading to Amarillo. Thank you so much for stopping. You're very kind." William gestured toward the cab. "Come on up. I'm going to Amarillo myself. You can ride along." The woman climbed up easily, settling into the passenger seat like she'd been traveling in trucks for years. She didn't have any luggage, no bag or backpack. Just appeared, hitching on a remote stretch of Route 66 in the middle of the night. "I'm William," he said, pulling back onto the highway. "I'm Eleanor," the woman replied. "Thank you again for stopping. Most drivers don't anymore." "Most drivers don't have any sense of hospitality," William said. "Route 66 used to be about community, about helping people get where they needed to go. Now everyone's in a rush. Nobody has time for anything." Eleanor smiled. "You're a romantic, Mr. Crawford. You think about the old days like they were better." William felt a slight chill. He hadn't told her his name. "How did you know my name?" "Your logbook. I saw it on the dashboard." Eleanor gestured toward the paperwork clipped to the visor. It was true, his name was written there. But she'd have needed to look carefully to see it in the darkness of the cab, especially with just the dashboard lights illuminating it. "Don't worry, I don't mean to seem strange. I just have good eyes for details." William relaxed slightly. "Well, yes, the old days were better in some ways. Everything moved slower, more human. People actually talked to each other." "Is that why you still drive Route 66 instead of using the interstates?" Eleanor asked. "For the nostalgia?" "Partly, but also because this road has history. It connects places. The interstates are just functional, designed to move cargo as efficiently as possible. Route 66 was about the journey, not the destination." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "That's a beautiful way to think about it. Most people today only think about destinations. They forget that the journey itself is the important part." They drove in comfortable silence for a while. William found Eleanor's presence oddly calming. She didn't demand constant conversation or fiddle with the radio, just sat quietly, looking out at the desert passing by in the darkness. Around midnight, William began to feel the fatigue setting in. His eyes were getting heavy, his reflexes slowing. "I'm going to need to stop soon," William said. "Find a place to rest." "There's a place ahead," Eleanor said. "An old motel. It's just a few miles. You should stop there." William hadn't noticed any signs indicating a motel. "How do you know about it?" "I've traveled this road many times. I know all the places. The motel is called the Starlight. It's been there for years. They still have rooms available, even late at night." William continued driving, watching carefully for signs of a motel. Sure enough, about 5 miles ahead, a faded sign appeared in his headlights. Starlight Motel. The building behind it looked like it had been built in the 1950s, a long row of connected rooms with individual carports. A neon sign flickered in the office window, casting pink and blue light across the parking lot. "There it is," Eleanor said, "just like I said." William pulled in, noting that his truck was the only vehicle in the lot. "You want to get a room too? I can pay for it. It's the least I can do for your company." Eleanor shook her head. "I don't need a room, Mr. Crawford. I'll just wait in the truck while you rest. I don't sleep anymore." That was a strange thing to say. "Don't sleep? Everyone sleeps. Not me. Not for a very long time now." Eleanor smiled that timeless smile. "Go ahead and rest. I'll keep watch." William was too tired to press the issue. He climbed down from the cab and walked to the motel office. An old man was working the desk, looking like he hadn't aged since the 1970s. He rented William a room without questions, took cash payment, and handed him a key attached to a plastic diamond-shaped tag. The room was clean but dated, furniture and decorations that hadn't been updated in decades. William showered, changed into clean clothes, and collapsed into the bed. He was asleep almost immediately, exhaustion pulling him down into deep, dreamless rest. He woke abruptly around 3 in the morning, disoriented and confused. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. Then it came back. The motel. Route 66. Eleanor. William grabbed his clothes and headed back to the truck. He found Eleanor still sitting in the passenger seat, exactly as he'd left her, staring out at the desert with an expression of infinite sadness. She didn't seem to notice him returning, didn't acknowledge him until he climbed into the driver's seat. "Did you sleep well?" she asked. "Yeah, surprisingly well. I was exhausted." William started the truck. "You sure you don't want to rest? Even if you don't sleep, you might want to use the facilities." "No, I'm fine as I am. Let's keep driving." They left the Starlight Motel behind, heading back onto Route 66. The landscape was identical to what they'd passed earlier, desert and darkness, occasional signs of abandoned buildings or forgotten towns. William found himself checking the odometer, verifying that they were actually making progress. According to the numbers, they were covering ground, getting closer to Amarillo. But the scenery wasn't changing, like they were driving through a repeating landscape. "Eleanor, how long have you been hitching?" William asked. "Since 1957, I died that year on this road in a car accident. A drunk driver hit me head-on near a town called Seligman. I was 28 years old. I never made it to where I was going that day." Eleanor's voice remained calm, factual, like she was reciting information from a history book. William's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "That's not funny. That's a very dark joke." "I'm not joking, Mr. Crawford. I've been riding Route 66 for 66 years, trying to complete the journey I never finished. Every trucker who stops for me, I travel with them for a while. But eventually, they either leave me at a truck stop, or they die in an accident, or they simply disappear from this road." "You're crazy. You're either crazy or trying to scare me." But even as William said it, he knew something was wrong. The sky hadn't changed. It was still the deep darkness of late night, but they'd been driving for almost 3 hours since he woke up. By now, they should be seeing the false dawn of pre-sunrise. The stars should be fading. But nothing had changed. The darkness remained absolute. "Check your fuel gauge," Eleanor said. "Check how much fuel you should have consumed in the time you've been driving." William glanced down. Full. His tank showed exactly full, just as it had when they'd left Santa Fe yesterday. It was impossible. He'd been driving constantly. The fuel should have been getting lower. He tried to focus, tried to make sense of what was happening. "What do you want?" William asked. "Why did you stop for you? What do you want from me?" "I don't want anything from you, Mr. Crawford. I just want company. I'm so tired of being alone on this road. For 66 years I've been alone. Every driver eventually leaves or dies. But for a while I have someone to talk to, someone to share the driving with. That's all I need. I'm not staying with you. I'm getting out of this truck right now." William eased off the accelerator, looking for a place to pull over. But the road ahead suddenly looked very different. The pavement had changed, becoming older, more weathered. The lane markings faded. The asphalt cracked. It looked like they were driving on a road that hadn't been maintained in years. "You can try to leave," Eleanor said gently. "But you won't be able to. This road has no exits for people like me. The highway has its own logic now. It takes back those it's claimed and reshapes itself to keep them. For you, for now, it will continue as long as I'm with you. But the moment you decide to abandon me, it will show you its true nature." William's rational mind was screaming that none of this was real, but his senses told him otherwise. The road was degrading in real time, the pavement breaking apart ahead of them. And when he glanced in his mirror, the road they'd just traveled looked pristine, perfect, like it was erasing itself behind them. "This isn't real," William said. "This is a dream. I'm still at the motel sleeping, and this is a nightmare." "Does it feel like a dream, Mr. Crawford?" Eleanor turned to look at him. Her face had changed. It looked older, not the timeless 30 she'd appeared to be. It looked ancient, weathered by decades. "Does it feel like you might wake up? Or does it feel exactly like driving a truck across America, which is something you've done thousands of times? What happens if I stop the truck? Then the road will stop. We'll both just sit here on Route 66, somewhere between where we've been and where we haven't gone yet. We'll sit, and eventually you'll accept it. Eventually you'll understand that you're not getting out of here, and you'll stop fighting. Then you'll become like me. You'll be the passenger on this road, the one who stops for new drivers, the one who tells them about the motel that doesn't exist and the desert that never ends." William's hands were shaking. He gripped the steering wheel harder, trying to control the truck, trying to control the situation. But Eleanor was right. He wasn't dreaming. This was happening. The road was degrading, the pavement crumbling into dust. The horizon ahead showed nothing but darkness, no destination, no end point. "There has to be a way out," William said desperately. "There has to be something I can do." "There is," Eleanor said. "You can stop the truck, you can walk away. But understand what that means. When you stop, the road stops with you. You'll be stranded on Route 66 and you'll never be able to leave. Or you can keep driving. You can continue with me, and eventually we'll reach Amarillo. Eventually we'll arrive at the destination. But when we do, I'll leave the truck, and you'll be alone here. Really alone. And then the next driver will come along and I'll catch their ride, and you'll still be here, waiting to be picked up by someone else. And that driver will end up like me eventually, or like you could be." William understood the trap. It was a closed circle, a nightmare of Route 66 that trapped people who still believed in the old roads, the historic highways, the journey itself. He could surrender to it now, become part of the loop. Or he could try to escape, though Eleanor had said that would only get him stranded. Against all logic, William did the first thing he thought of. He stomped on the accelerator instead of the brake, pushing the truck faster, harder toward the darkness ahead. The truck roared, the engine protesting at the sudden stress. Eleanor didn't react, just sat calmly as the speedometer climbed to 80, then 90, then 100 miles per hour. The road deteriorated even faster now, the pavement shaking apart. The truck bounced and jostled, threatening to shake itself apart. William's vision blurred from the vibration. But he kept accelerating, pushing the truck beyond safe limits, willing himself through whatever barrier kept him trapped on this road. Then he saw lights. Ahead through the darkness, real lights. Street lights, buildings. He was approaching a town, a real town, not the empty ghost towns that Eleanor had mentioned. William eased up slightly on the accelerator, trying to control the truck's speed as he approached what looked like city limits. The town materialized around him. Amarillo. His destination. The same Amarillo he'd been trying to reach since leaving Santa Fe. He pulled the truck onto a side street away from Eleanor and brought it to a stop with a screech of brakes and a cloud of dust. Eleanor was gone. The passenger seat was empty. William looked around frantically, but there was no sign of her anywhere. The truck cab smelled normal, the leather seats cool and empty. For a moment, William wondered if she had ever been there at all. But then he noticed the logbook, his personal logbook, where he recorded his trips and notes. There was an entry he didn't remember making, written in handwriting that wasn't his. It read, "Picked up Eleanor on Route 66 near Seligman. She died in 1957. She never made it to Amarillo, neither did I." The date on the entry was from 2 weeks ago. William checked his own records. 2 weeks ago he had picked up cargo from Santa Fe, but his record of that trip was blank. He had no recollection of it. The next entry after that was yesterday, picking up the antiques from the same client beginning the current run. William delivered the antiques in Amarillo, completed the job, and got paid. He drove back to Santa Fe, but he never drove Route 66 again. He uses the interstates now, the big highways where you don't see hitchhikers, where you can pretend the old roads don't exist. Sometimes, late at night, when he's checking his fuel gauge, he sees names and dates written in the margins of his logbook. Other drivers who have given Eleanor a ride since he did. Some have years of entries, showing them trapped in a loop of driving with her forever. Others have just one entry, dated the day they disappeared. William considers reporting what happened to authorities, but knows they would never believe him. Part of him worries that drawing attention to what he experienced might cause Eleanor to find him again. He might see her standing on a highway shoulder, thumb out, that timeless smile on her ancient face waiting for him to stop. So William keeps quiet and avoids the old roads now. He drives modern interstates, follows GPS coordinates, trusts corporate logistics. Every time he sees a hitchhiker, he accelerates without hesitation. He knows that some roads exist outside normal reality, that some passengers never truly arrive at their destinations, and that Route 66 still waits for the next romantic dreamer who believes the journey matters more than the arrival. Eleanor remains patient on that ancient highway, ready to climb into another cab with that eternal smile, beginning the loop again.